Welcome to the show. We hope you have a blast. Thanks for making time for the Dealer Talk podcast. Another business leader, here's a penny for your thought.
What up? Welcome to another episode of the Dealer Talk podcast. This is your host, Herb Anderson. Thank you so much for tuning in. In today's session, we're going to have an amazing conversation. We're going to be talking about just the inventory situation that we have going on, which is pretty interesting. I know a lot of you out there are definitely looking at ways to kind of leverage the current situation. And so we have an amazing guest, Mr. Tom Gregg is on the program today. Tom, what's up, dude? How are you, man?
Good, Herb. How you doing?
I'm doing awesome, dude. It's great to have you on the show. I'm super excited to have a conversation with you. And, I typically kick things off with your background, man. So tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I've had great experience in the car business. I was a porter at 16 and opportunity to sell cars at 18. And from there, I became a used car manager, basically between, being an internet manager and the new car manager, used cars. And really, I found my passion around managing used car inventory and used car departments. And fortunate for me, I did work at a high-performing dealership in Elgin and then all throughout northwest part of Chicago. And towards the end of the 20 years that I spent at the dealership level, I was running BDC e-commerce and leveraging technology to do so. So I found really a significant need to buy cars kind of outside of the norm of buying cars from the auction. And certainly cars, dealerships that are doing a lot of volume need to acquire cars. And so I found the need to source them outside of the typical realm and went directly to consumers.
Right on, man. That's awesome, dude. So I got to ask, man, what's going on in the background over there, dude? Where you at? You on a jog or something?
In Michigan. So out actually camping this weekend. So a chance to
awesome,
get away
dude.
for a couple of days.
Yeah. Shout out to Michigan. I was born in Wayne, and I'm from Venezuela, but I was born in Michigan, moved to Venezuela when I was a little kid. So it was just a weird situation there. But, I spent, I went to high school, to college out there. And so go blue.
Yeah. It's a great state.
Yeah, for sure. All right, man. So let's just get into it, dude. So, what in the hell is going on in the market right now when it comes to inventory, dude? What is happening?
A lot's going on, Herb. So specifically around used cars, we know that buying cars from consumers is really a position that dealers need to be operating in, because the reality of going to the auction and buying cars and paying a high price, it was near retail. That's starting to level out and come down. But dealers need to have an alternative strategy to buying cars. As we know, relying simply on trade-ins is not a viable solution. So when you look at where you're going to acquire cars, dealers need to look at other places. So we've had a lot of dealers reach out looking for alternatives, buying cars from consumers, refining the process in the service drive, and is getting better at overall trade-ins.
But so why is that the situation? Because I've kind of wrestled with that information myself. I had Glenn Lundy on the program here recently, and we talked about that, and he had some really good points. But I want to expand on that a little bit further, man. Like when COVID started, dude, I was freaking out. I was like thinking about, what does this mean for the automotive industry? It just seemed like we were doomed for a pretty rough year. And then we've seen some pretty incredible results, record months, high grosses, service activity is up. That seems to be kind of perpetuated, if you will, across the industry, nationally, if you will. And then you have the situation with inventory where it's just ridiculously expensive. So why is that?
I think the demand is driving this. When you look at new cars, there aren't as many new cars that are being produced. So you have a shortage of new car inventory, and that's going to drive the demand when there's a smaller supply. And I think it's clear that there is a newfound appreciation for vehicle ownership, where people that previously may have taken Uber, may have taken Lyft, now owning your car is definitely a preference. When you look at, would you rather get in a car with an Uber driver? I think many people would prefer to own their own vehicle. So Personal vehicle ownership definitely is at a premium than what it was before. And I think you have a lot of consumers that are also more cost conscious. So when you look at, what does the future look like? There's a lot of uncertainty. Uncertainty is going to drive people to make different choices. So even if somebody was considering a new car that it may have had the means prior, these people may be looking to buy a used car and pay less than what they would have been paying for a new car. So I think you have a significant reduction in supply of inventory. You have an increased demand. So this is driving the prices. And I think a lot of dealers did not anticipate that there were going to be as many used car sales. So many held off. And those that held off found out really quick that there was going to be a flood back to people that need inventory. So many dealers were flocking to where they know to buy cars. That's buying cars from the auction.
All right. So yeah, no, I mean, listen, that makes a whole lot of sense. And I'm sure that we're all kind of seeing that writing on the wall, if you will. But should we expect this to be the new norm? I mean, do we really see that? Because
actually, I did leave one thing out, Herb, and that was simply that consumers had extra cash. So, and I spoke to Dale Pollack from V.A.N, and he actually shared some data with me that with Cox, they were able to tie vehicle sales directly to money hitting consumers' pockets. So, and they also tied this back down to in years past that when tax seasons come out, or tax season happens, you have an increased excess funds that consumers have, and they go out and they buy cars. So with the stimulus likely being an election year, so I and Dale Pollack shared his feedback with me was that, he is cautiously watching, but has high expectation that there's going to be continued demand for vehicles. So if people have money to spend, they're going to spend it.
Sure. No, that's definitely a piece of the puzzle, no question. But how does that, I guess my I don't know if overarching is the right word, but my main question for anybody listening to this that's kind of preparing or should be preparing for the last quarter of 2020, which has already been a significantly challenged year, even though for some dealerships it's been a blessing in disguise. What should we be doing, man? What's the recommendation? Like what should we be paying attention to?
Yeah, well, it's been clear that dealers had to go back. They had to refine the process. They had to get much better at the business they were running. So, like many businesses, we had to either furlough people, let people go, and that put dealers and managers in a position and they had to do things themselves. So I think a lot of them learned maybe inefficiencies. They learned ways to do things better. They learned how to utilize technology to a higher degree. And this is one of the reasons that we saw the profits increase is because processes got better, utilization of technology got better. And as they brought people back, that thing they had already set a new standard for profitability expectations. When we look at the utilization of, people doing home deliveries, this is something that consumers have requested. They do it in many other industries, groceries, delivery products, Amazon, Whole Foods delivering food. So when you address the consumer's needs, people are willing to pay for this. So when you ask the question, what should dealers be looking at? I think the demand is going to continue to be strong for inventory.
Let's expand on that, man, because what do you think through the end of this year, we should expect the levels to be, or when should we start adjusting? What do you mean by that?
I think there's going to be sales. I think are going to be pretty steady for the rest of this year. I could be wrong. There's probably going to be a seasonal adjustment in states that aren't in the South and in the West, but I would anticipate that there's going to be pretty steady sales for most markets.
I think I tend to agree with you, man. I think that there's a couple of factors, right? So obviously there's still people that are deferring payments on major expenses like mortgages and those sorts of things. So that's still happening. And I've known of cases where it's going all the way through December. So that puts money back into people's pockets. I know a lot of people have been working from home, so it's not like they lost their job. They just have to readjust to their roles or their position. So the money's still flowing in. And then interest rates, right? Money's cheap right now. Like you can refinance your house and all those things, and that's going to put more money in your pocket. And to your point, like when you have more money in your pocket and then you've been locked up for 3-4 months and you can't travel and you can't even in some cases go to a bar or go to a dinner with your significant other or whatever, all those things add stress to, it just kind of makes you want to liberate yourself as a consumer. You know what I mean? So I think that all that plays in, and I tend to agree that I think for the rest of this year, it's going to look pretty positive, but I am concerned at what it means for the future because, eventually there's going to be a lot of people that are going to lose their jobs through this transition. So that's number one on my list of concern. Number two is, we're behind, dude. Like manufacturers were shut down, so their production indexes or whatever are going to be affected, and that's going to affect the dealership. And inventory seems to hold steady, even though we are seeing a little bit of a decrease. A lot of the used inventory out there is still relatively expensive. And so you're in a situation with dealers where you buy at high prices and you risk losing that later on, or you just kind of hold steady until the market levels out, but that leaves you without inventory. And so you're missing all these opportunities. And so for the decision makers listening to this, what is the formula, man? Like, what do you guys see? What should we be doing that we're not currently doing? And more importantly, more than anything else, is how do we prepare, even though it doesn't happen, right? Even though the worst of the worst doesn't come to fruition, which is typically the case, what should we do to prepare for that so that we're not left in a situation where it's going to impact our business?
Well, I think many of the dealers have already begun doing this. I mean, during COVID, as I just mentioned, is that dealers got better at processes. So I think that as you get better at addressing consumers' needs, and you're going to turn your inventory faster. And I think, you bring up a good point though, Herb, about, people losing jobs. I saw in automotive news, it was either yesterday or today, number of manufacturers are cutting. A couple companies did cut back, pretty large number of jobs. So, I would be cautiously optimistic about the fourth quarter, but I still think that consumers are going to be out buying vehicles, and I think that's going to continue to put pressure on acquisitions.
Yeah, no, like I said, man, I agree. I want to be the positive kind of voice here and say that I think that that's going to be the case. But there is a little without running the risk of being cynical, I do feel that we just got to be a little bit more prepared. You know what I mean? Otherwise, we're going to be caught in a situation. For example, like when this whole thing happened in March, I advised a lot of my clients to buy as many pieces of inventory as you could. The prices were ridiculously low. I say it doesn't matter, you know what I mean? Like buy them now, you know what I mean? And store them wherever you can. And a lot of them didn't. And then 2 months later, they were like, shit.
Retail.
We wish we would have listened to you because, you know what I mean? And I was like, I even put that on social media. I put it on LinkedIn and YouTube and all these different channels on my top 5 to look out for, which I don't share that stuff typically other than just people that are my clients. But I decided that it was a critical time and I wanted to kind of share those pieces for a few months. And so I'm looking at the future and I'm thinking that there's a similar situation happening here in the next few months. And I want to use this outlet as a way to, I just kind of put that information out there. Again, it's not being doom and gloom. I want to make sure that we're prepared and we're ready.
Yeah. So as you talk to other dealers, what are you hearing from your stores?
So, I mean, listen, the consensus is, prices are ridiculously high. Right. And so what people are coming to me, what dealerships are coming to me right now is what can we do to buy, right, from consumers directly, because auctions right now are it's not even a thing, right, because everything is done digitally. And so the auctions itself have had to adjust, and that causes the dealerships to adjust. And then there's the fees and all that stuff that's always been an issue. And so how can we acquire inventory straight from consumers is kind of like the I don't want to say the plea, but it really feels like that sometimes. It's like, how can we get more cars from people in the streets and not have to rely on the auctions to kind of provide that for us?
Yeah, and this is what we are seeing our dealers do as well. So I mentioned about the process, and in years past, when it was easier to buy cars from the auctions and they weren't transacting for retail, and many of our stores, it was a nice to have. It was nice to have a buy center.
Mm-hmm.
It was nice to buy cars from consumers, but it wasn't always a need to have, a need to do. And now we've seen dealers really embrace it, where they have to buy cars from consumers because they're not getting enough trade-ins. In many cases, they're not transacting as many new vehicles. So if you have fewer retail vehicles going out, you have fewer retailable trades coming in. So where are you going to acquire cars from if you're not getting them from the auction and you're not getting them from your trades? So you have to go out and find them other places. So the dealers that we work with, we help dealers buy cars from consumers. And we do this by aggregating data to help them to engage and to communicate with the consumers. And we connect the dealer's message to consumers. And what we do is we help them to acquire cars that are very profitable because the dealer is communicating on their own terms. The auctions are designed, brilliantly designed to elicit a lot of emotions. It's exciting, but when it's exciting and pulling out emotions, that's what is driving the prices up. When you get to make a very logical, sound decision, you may stop bidding, when somebody's in your showroom store. And you also have the ability to control the terms. And the stores that are doing really well, they focus on making offers. So they track their processes. They track how many consumers are engaging with. They track how many offers they're putting out there. And what they're sharing with us is the more offers they put, they aren't just, taking somebody's head off, trying to steal a car offers. These are fair market value offers. So engaging with the community, letting them know that they provide a service that, in many cases, the stores make this process is pretty daunting to sell your car on your own. But if, as a dealership, if you can make the process fast, safe, and easy, you're helping the consumer, you're providing them a service, a safe one, and you're also acquiring, fast turning, very retailable vehicles. And even if it's not retailable, we have a lot of stores that make significant profit on wholesales. And, the nice thing about engaging with the consumer that you're going to ultimately wholesale their car, you don't have to buy it if you're not safe in the transaction. Compared to a trade, you may step up on a trade because you need that front deal.
Sure.
A car that you're buying from a consumer, if you happen to get it, great. Hopefully you have $500 or $1,000 in profit and you make it worthwhile. So, buying cars from consumers, when you ask the question, what should they be doing? I think every dealer should be buying cars from consumers.
Do you think we miss opportunities, man, when it comes to that? I think a lot of dealers do. I think a lot of dealers are, they have a certain price in mind of what they need to make. And they leave a lot of deals on the table. And I see that a lot when I look at the V.A.N.'s lost trade reports.
Yeah.
And then I see that vehicle that was purchased somewhere else and then it was sold. And so I question that. Like, why do you think that is, man? Why do we miss the opportunity? Like, if I can buy that car and make $300, is that not worth it? You know what I mean? If I do it in volumes enough that justifies
it may. It depends on a number of factors. So one factor is there a dealer imposed pack? So if a dealer has a $500 pack on a car and they make $300, it may not be advantageous to entertain transacting. So I think it depends a lot on the cost structure, the incentive package. So, but if a dealership has a very low pack, then I would agree with you, Herb, that if you can make $300 or $400, and also the bottom line is, can you delight the consumer in the process? Can you make $300 for maybe a lower profit on that first deal? But are you going to delight a customer that may come back and buy more cars? Might they refer other business to you? There's a good chance of it.
Yeah, that's a great point too, man. I think that we overlook those things when it comes to those types of transactions. And I'm for one that any opportunity is a good opportunity if we treat it the right way. You know what I mean? Because even if we're losing money on a deal, and I know it sounds weird, man, it really does sound weird, but if we're losing money on a deal and we do it right, we make money because they send us their friends, they send us their family. The next time they want to buy a car, now they trust us, and now the opportunity to make money. And then not to mention the service impact, right? If we're keeping, what is the number, 70, 80 cents per every dollar spent, and we get that customer to come back through their ownership journey, then I still feel like we're ahead. So I question sometimes I feel like oftentimes dealers in particular are kind of stepping over what's that saying? Like you're stepping
dollars
over
to pick up pennies.
Yeah, man, I do. I really do feel like that's the case, and it just I don't understand that. I feel like we're missing the bigger picture here. I don't know. What's your guys' take on that?
I mean, I would say so. Certainly some are, but we deal with a lot of dealers that do a phenomenal job. So we deal with a lot of dealerships that have good people, good processes. They focus on taking care of the consumers, and which ultimately become customers. Look at Carvana, and their earnings calls. They buy a lot of cars from consumers, and they consistently have on their earnings calls the term "cars from customers," and they don't call these cars from consumers because ultimately, whether they're buying or selling, they plan on that being a customer. So it's interesting if you look through the transcripts, the number of cars from customers phrase that shows up each quarter, it continues to increase. It's a significant strategy for their success.
Yeah, no, I agree. So moving things along, I wanted to ask the question about change, right? Because it's kind of been a theme for the podcast so far. I think we've done 4 or 5 sessions for season 5, and I've mentioned this in every single one. So I'm going to do it again on this one. But, this whole thing that the industry is forever changed or whatever, when it comes to vehicle acquisition and just what's happening right now, maybe not vehicle acquisition, but what's happening right now with used cars and profitability. Do you think that this situation is going to serve as a wake-up call to all dealers that we need to maybe come together more and hold pricing and all these things so that we can truly make a decent gross on what we sell? Do you think that we're going to unify because of this situation and realize, hey, that it's such an impact right now that we've had as far as money's being made? Do you think that this is going to rally the dealership community? Are we going to be able to take advantage of this, or are we going to go back to battling every single discount just to get that deal?
I think human nature is that many of us, or most of us, have very short-term memory. So when you ask, do I think it's going to be a long-term fix? I don't think so. It may last a little while, but the question is how long. I think ultimately dealers are going to be very competitive. It's in their nature. They're incentivized to be competitive. So I think I don't see it being a permanent fix. I don't see it being years down the road. I think dealers are going to resume back to being very competitive.
Yeah, you know what? I agree, but there's definitely a part of me that kind of I don't know, maybe it's naive in thinking that there's such a prime, like the one thing right now that I'm preaching to every single dealer that's willing to listen, or every single decision maker, is that, listen, you're going to sell a shitload of cars right now. That's just the world that we live in. Whether you do marketing or not, it's irrelevant to a certain point. I mean, you have to have a message out there for sure, but it's really not what's going to drive a lot of your business. A lot of this is just situation-based, situation-related. And so now is the prime opportunity for every single dealership out there to educate. Like a lot of your marketing dollars should be spent on education information, right? Because I feel like that's really what is going to set us up for a better situation in the future when this whole thing passes. And what do I mean by that? So educating our customers on why to schedule an appointment, and educating our customers on the trade-in process and buying online and all these things that we've tried to set up but really haven't got a hold of it. Yeah. And so I feel like now is the prime time to do that. And so, we don't have these situations, these issues of price and discounts and show me your invoice and that sort of a deal when it comes to buying a house, for example. Why is that?
Yeah.
Why in the car business? Why do we have to? And then we perpetuate the issue by doing that. And then the customer comes here and then they go somewhere else and they go somewhere else. And everywhere they go, we're trying to compete. And next thing we're left with is nothing. It's just bare bones, minimal profitability. And it sucks, man. I don't quite understand why we do that to ourselves. It's just crazy that we don't, especially now, we should take that opportunity to kind of come together. I mean, what do you think about that? Do you think that it makes sense now more than ever?
Well, I think in theory it does, but I think many dealers are incentivized to compete. When you look at stair-step programs, I mean,
Sure.
stair-step programs incentivize dealers to really dig down. I mean, the only way that you're going to sell way more cars than your competitor is, well, obviously, hopefully you can educate the consumer and you can do, certain things that will help sell. But if you can offer a vehicle, $1,000 less than the one down the street, I think consumers are going to be gravitating towards the lower price car. So I think when you have inherent programs with manufacturers that are stair-step, I think they inherently drive the numbers down because they can legitimately sell cars for less if they sell more volume. So I think these are very flawed programs that until we go away with that, I think that'd be the start.
You know what? I agree. That makes a lot of sense. I kind of agree with that. I think that, yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's talk about the auction, man. What do you guys foresee? How is that going to evolve in a post-COVID world? Whenever that happens, do you think it's going to be less? Do you think auctions are going to go completely digital? Like, what are you guys anticipating?
Yeah, I don't know about complete digital, but I think there's a significant more of an appreciation for condition reports and being able to do more remote. So I think there'll be continued drive for that. Maybe dealers that were cautious to buy cars online now we're not given an option. So, and it's not like they may have given something a shot for a week or two and then resume back to the auction. They had no choice. So if you can establish a habit and get comfortable with doing it for a period of months, I think it's going to transition to buying more cars remotely, buying more cars in the auction, online, more so than in the lanes.
But so what do you say about moves like Cox Automotive made where they laid off, like, I don't know, was it 800 people or something like that were all in the auction? And I read an article where they were talking about, we're going to take this time to readjust our digital experience. And like, isn't that an indicator that maybe that's what the future looks like?
Well, I think it's an indicator that companies are learning that they don't need the same amount of people to do business. So I think as you do things online and do things with computer aided systems, you can in many cases be more efficient, which requires fewer people. So I think it's a start is having efficient technology. And I don't think you need the same amount of people if you're conducting more of the sales online than what you would be if they're in the auction lanes.
Yeah, but I mean, I agree, but I also think that, what I was talking about earlier with as far as education, I think that a lot of these companies, look at Backlot Cars, they just sold that business for what, 485 million or something like that. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of these companies are looking at the situation a little bit different, and they're starting to realize that there's a shift here. And although I don't,
you bring up a good point.
We haven't put our finger on it. We don't know exactly.
There are fewer cars transacting.
Sure. Yeah.
So when you look at what the basis of the auctions are, there are fewer cars transacting at the auction. I don't know what the numbers are, but I would substantiate that there are less. So if there's less cars selling for at the auction, that means they have less revenue. Less revenue will in most cases lead to fewer people. So, and I think dealers now have more choices when you bring up backlots. You have ACV, You have other inventory sourcing solutions. Companies like us are helping them to buy cars direct. And when auctions inherently get a bad rap for fees, for transportation cost, guarantee fees to make sure the cars has no issues. So there's a lot of fees involved with this, and so dealers are being forced to find alternative solutions to buy cars.
Right. So with that, I wanted to ask you about. I wanted to ask you about kind of like the future of just acquisition, man. Like, what do because and I'm gonna this is kind of like the last question before we go into. I want to give you guys some time to talk about what you guys do, but when it comes to the process at the dealership for acquisition, how does that have to evolve to fit in the world that we live in today?
Well, I think you need to look at what options you have. So if the old way of doing business doesn't work, or it doesn't work as well as it used to, you need to look at other solutions, other alternatives. So you mentioned backlots. I just mentioned ACV. There are other ways that you can acquire cars. You can get, maybe buying and selling cars direct from other dealers. I know there's products out there that help dealers to buy and sell direct. Wholesaling and buying direct could be another alternative as well, and buying cars from consumers. So I think there's an evolution that is taking place, and I think many dealers were forced to do so.
But at the consumer level, when we're on the front lines, like if I was a salesperson, does my conversation need to change a little bit with those vehicles that come in, that I come in contact with, that I could potentially acquire for the stores that I work with? Or is it pretty much business as usual? Like, how does that, because I think the decision makers get the point, but I don't think we're translating or trickling down that information to the front lines. And I think that the people that are interacting with these, and this is just based on me seeing a lot of lost trailed reports and seeing that we're missing tons of opportunities that turn out somewhere else in our market, and they sell quickly. And it's like, why did we allow that to be the case? Why didn't we get that deal? You know what I mean? Why? Because we were trying to make more money than we should have. Doesn't that, you know what I mean? Like, doesn't that conversation need to shift? Should we not be putting more pressure on the salesperson to really understand the necessity of getting that piece of inventory?
I think if a dealer has a policy to incentivize that could certainly help mitigate losing deals.
Sure.
Right. So even if somebody does not transact, I don't see that a lot, where a dealership has a pay plan that incentivizes sales consultants to buy cars, even if they don't buy a car from the store. Some do, but it's not common. So in other words, like if you had somebody came in to trade a car for another one, I don't see many cases where the salesperson buys that vehicle or is incentivized to do so. I think a lot of states also have tax credits where that wouldn't necessarily benefit the consumer to sell that car directly to the dealership and go buy a car somewhere else. But some states do offer, at least rather they don't offer, but they do not have a tax credit program on trades, where that would be certainly a lot more available to do.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right, man. So we're getting really close to that time. I do have a question that I ask everybody that comes on the show. So I wanted to obviously go down that route. But before we get to that, tell us a little bit about V.A.N, man. What do you guys do? How do you help dealers? Like, give us the pitch, man.
Yeah. So V.A.N has been in business since 2013. We help dealers buy cars from consumers, and we help them to buy cars that are profitable, cars that are fast turning. And we have a technology where we aggregate data. We have basically an acquisition CRM that they can track all the activities. In many cases, we automate out communications. We make the heavy lifting. We take the heavy lifting off the dealers to help them connect with consumers and buy profitable cars that sell quickly. And we also have, all of our performance managers have direct automotive experience. So we coach, train, we encourage, and we help dealers to control the narrative and help them to buy and sell more vehicles.
Right on, man. And so how can we get in touch with you? Obviously, we're going to put all this information in the show notes. So definitely go there. If you're watching this on, or if you're listening to this on the podcast app, and if you're watching this on my YouTube channel, then go to the video descriptions. We're going to put all this information in there. But I will say this, listen, we're not for or against anything on the show. I just like to give out this information. But I appreciate the fact that, number one, you guys are exclusive. So I definitely want you to talk a little bit more about that so that everybody listening in can understand what that means. And then, dude, like any platform that allows you to connect with consumers that are getting ready to sell their vehicle, I think that it's a must, just because you have a first shot, with that customer. Even if you don't get it, the fact that you can connect with them and have a kind of raise your hand for that piece of inventory, I think that puts you in a better position at the end of the month. So, yeah, man. So tell us how we can connect with you guys, and then go to the show notes, and then talk to us a little bit about the exclusivity piece.
Yeah. So our website is buywithvan.com. So BUY with WITHVAN.com. And the exclusivity you're referring to is on the product that we call Engage. So we help you to automatically engage with consumers. So we automate out text messages, even form completions for some websites, a message that's of interest. So most of the dealers' messages that go out will announce the name of the buyer. Typically, it's a buy center that they're representing. And they want to make an offer to the consumer with no obligation to buy from them. And then we have a call to action that encourages the consumer to text or call. So the dealer, or rather the seller, does not know that we exist. They just get a communication from us on behalf of the dealership. And when they respond, we route those calls directly to the dealership. And then, as I mentioned about the platform, we have a dedicated platform that dealers can access, where they can manage all the inventory, they can manage communications, and we track everything. We even have Facebook Marketplace, which you might know how challenge that is to view inventory. Just because there's cars, they don't have a toggle between consumers or dealers, so they just have inventory. But we actually have the ability to see just the consumer cars and help them to gauge and just turn over just the stones that they want to, and be very efficient. So in the exclusivity, so you asked about that. So we permit up to 2 dealers in a market for that product that I was referring to about the Engage, where we send out those communications.
Right on, man. Dude, thank you so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. This has been a really good conversation. I think it's very, very relevant. And so I'm just thrilled to have this opportunity to get this information out there. There is one question that I ask everybody that comes to the show, and that question is, where do you see the automotive industry headed in the next 5 years, and why?
Next 5 years. So first of all, thank you, Herb. I appreciate you inviting me on to your show as well. Next 5 years, I see a lot of activity with electric vehicles. So I see a lot of buzz. So I see a lot more electric vehicles that will be on the roads. When you look at the state of California, I don't remember the year, but they're trying to eliminate gas emissions altogether. So I would see a lot more vehicles, and you also have continued market share being taken on with companies that are going to continue to get better at processes, get very qualified, good people, and that's where I see the business going.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for doing this. Great answer. I love that, man. It makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much again for the information. Please go to the show notes, connect with the people over at V.A.N, the Vehicle Acquisition Network. Great company, lots of opportunity there, especially in the times that we live in right now. I think that, again, any platform where you can leverage the power of purchasing from consumers, at the very least, is something that you need to look into. And so I highly, highly suggest you check these folks out. Again, come to your own conclusions. We're not for or against anything. But I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to share this information. Thank you so much, Tom, for doing this, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Herb.
All right, everybody. That's all the time that we have for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as usual, we'll talk later.
We only host a well respected The vendor LexisNexis, we don't sell digital marketing.
What you do?
We inspect it with our DT vendor management solutions. We come in like the EPA to clear out the pollution.
Take the trash
Go
out.
keep your P&L clean, your inventory lean.
From product pitches, meetings to cost negotiations, your vendors have you swamped. You have cars to sell, but most of your time goes in managing your vendor relationships. Wouldn't it help to have someone navigate the way ahead? Enter Dealer Talk Vendor Management Solutions. A filter between you and your vendor so you only have to deal with what's most important. We inspect your digital data to get optimum results for your money. Here's what we do. Give you an accurate idea of what's working and what's not for every digital service. Get vendors to submit monthly highlights, lowlights, and recommendations. Sift through their data to give you those metrics that matter. Evaluate all package, content, or cost changes and product pitches. Do monthly marketing budget analysis to ensure better ROIs. Finally, we give you concise reports and monthly videos with actionable insights. Now, you can focus on what really matters, selling cars. Contact us today and your first 30 days are free. Let's build your business together.